When you think of Batman video games, the first thing that likely comes to mind is the Batman Arkham Trilogy or Gotham Knights, since that game recently came out. What doesn't come to mind, however, is all of the straight up terrible, just okay, or even hidden gem Batman games that we got back in the day. And since this is the case, I decided that it was time to play a game that's deemed to be one of the worst Batman games ever made. Why? It's because I'm going on a journey to find out which game is the worst superhero game ever made. And while I don't know what game will inevitably earn this rightful title, what I do know is that we're starting this journey off hot with Batman Dark Tomorrow. To be as honest and as blunt as possible, Batman Dark Tomorrow, which was developed by HotGen and was released on the GameCube and the original Xbox, is a terrible video game. While it tries to tell a fairly compelling, dark and gritty story of Batman being forced to save Gotham yet again from both popular and unpopular Batman villains to have taken over Gotham, there's almost nothing positive about this game. There's nothing in Dark Tomorrow that feels like missed potential, nor is there any way of kindly saying that this game is only rough around the edges, and apparently people felt the exact same way when this game was released in 2003. Notable review site IGN had this to say in their now hilarious but at the time very scathing review of Batman Dark Tomorrow. The only true redeeming quality of Batman Dark Tomorrow is that any poor sap who bought this game can probably still get $25 trade-in at their local game store. Hey, remember when video games were $25 back in the day? Good times. Batman Dark Tomorrow is one of the rare video games where every single aspect of the game feels like it was purposely designed to piss you off, which is why I view it as being on the same tier as Aquaman Battle for Atlantis, another game I discussed on this channel a while back. Dark Tomorrow is incredibly aimless in the sense that it doesn't really tell you what you're supposed to do at the start of any mission. It just puts you in a level and hopes you figure it out. The camera is so bad that you feel like you're constantly fighting with it, and this problem is mostly highlighted by the Black Mask boss fight that takes place in the world's smallest but most obnoxious warehouse ever made. The gameplay isn't fun by any stretch of the imagination because you're just knocking thugs out and running past them or handcuffing them after you knock them out. After all, they do get back up after temporarily being knocked out. And finally, even the missions vary in length to the point where it's so confusing that it's almost laughable. Some missions are ridiculously long, such as the overly long mission that takes place in Gotham City sewers, while other missions are incredibly short, like a mission where Batman jumps down from one building to another just so that the game can give you a cutscene to progress the story. And these things aren't even the biggest problems with this game. The biggest problem with Dark Tomorrow is the simple fact that Batman doesn't feel like a superhero. Yes, he's human and he doesn't have powers like Aquaman per se. However, there is almost zero reason why regular street thugs with guns should be able to keep you in a loop of getting punched and kicked until you inevitably die. This is Batman who we're talking about here, an incredibly well-trained vigilante who's dealt with the likes of Killer Croc, Poison Ivy, Clayface, and Joker. A random thug with a gun, let alone a group of thugs, shouldn't be able to drop kick Batman, causing him to be stun locked until his inevitable death. And while that may sound like a harsh or unfair criticism considering the time of this game's release, it's hard to look past this annoying problem considering not only does it ruin the entire experience of playing this game, but the game also gives Batman separate health bars for both his health and body armor. And if getting jumped by thugs isn't bad enough, well, just take a look at this nonsense. Yes, I actually managed to somehow get jumped by a group of Gotham City sewer rats. And you want to know what's unfortunate? I almost want to give Batman Dark Tomorrow credit for this ridiculousness. Without this game committing to its fairly compelling story that's dark, gritty, and somehow actually kind of weird in a good way, I don't think I'd ever be able to say that Batman got jumped by a bunch of rats. This absurdity is allowed to happen because rather than wasting time on telling the typical Batman origin story, Dark Tomorrow covers all of that information in an incredibly brief but understandable opening cutscene so it could jump to the story of the game, which is that Gotham is yet again being taken over by a bunch of crime lords. And while that story does sound fairly repetitive or generic, considering Gotham is almost always being taken over by crime lords, I think there's two things that help me somewhat appreciate what the story of this game was going for. The first thing is that this game has a fairly stellar cast of villains. It basically has every single iconic Batman villain you know and love, but it also includes a couple of unpopular villains like Black Mask, the Ventriloquist, and Ratcatcher. It's hard to not appreciate that, or to not simply write this game off in its entirety for this single reason alone. We're so unused to seeing unpopular or rare Batman villains make an appearance in Batman media, even to this day, that seeing these characters get somewhat of a spotlight is something that a Batman fan like myself can appreciate. It's just a shame that with how bad this game is, most people will never come to appreciate these characters' appearances, since Dark Tomorrow is repetitive, boring, and an absolute chore to play through. The second thing though is that for how bad the actual game itself looks, Dark Tomorrow's cutscenes and voice acting are actually pretty good. I almost kind of love the art style of this game's cutscenes because it looks and feels like a comic book brought to life. It allows a character like Batman or supporting characters like Oracle or Commissioner Gordon to have the opportunity to temporarily shine in the cutscenes they're in, despite Dark Tomorrow being one of the worst superhero video games I've ever played.
Find the origin of that satellite transmission and who sent it.
You got it, boss.
I've pinpointed the beacon to a 5-meter radius from your current position.
Commissioner,
Must you do that every time?
what's wrong?
And if you liked what you've seen from both Oracle and Commissioner Gordon, I do want to highlight this one line which I personally thought was fairly funny that Batman says to Robin after the Ratcatcher boss fight.
You're in the sewers?
That's right.
Oh, man.
And make sure your rabies shots are up to date.
However, it's truly hard to appreciate these cutscenes or small story beats because the cutscenes are so far and few in between, and with these cutscenes being fairly brief, which was fairly normal for this era in video games, you spend more time appreciating the fact that you're given a genuine reason to put the controller down and not play Batman Dark Tomorrow than actually having the ability to spend time appreciating the ongoing cutscene. Every single time you're thrown back into gameplay after a cutscene just finished, you can't help but immediately remember why this entire game feels like a waste of time. These feelings come from a genuine place because within such a short period, you're already bored of handcuffing thugs, you're already frustrated by the game's lack of communication, your patience is already wearing thin because of the lack of control you have with Dark Tomorrow's camera constantly getting in the way. The camera makes it almost unbearable to play this game since you're constantly unable to clearly run down hallways without making an unintentional wrong turn, since the camera will randomly pivot in a way that makes you go backward. It's impossible to run around in small corridors to open doors or even deal with random enemies that appear when you open a door as well, and it's all because of the camera arguably being the biggest flaw of Batman Dark Tomorrow. Another massive problem or reason to not play Dark Tomorrow is the bosses in this game. Some of the bosses in this game are so incredibly overpowered for no reason at all. Black Mask's gunshot make Batman feel like he's wearing a regular suit instead of a bat suit. Getting to the Ventriloquist is ridiculously hard for no reason at all. Ratcatcher's rats are annoying as hell, and Killer Croc's mechanics aren't even explained to you. You're just thrown into that boss fight that's a small square room filled with water, and unless you do what I did, you're basically never going to find out that Killer Croc's single mechanic of trying to drown Batman is avoidable. And what makes a small problem like this so frustrating is that this game will give the most useless but obscure hints every now and then for things you already know about or figured out on your own. However, when it comes to boss fights with specific mechanics like Killer Croc's for example, the game tells you absolutely nothing, when even the most simple but obscure hint can help point you in the right direction rather than hoping that you spam enough buttons to finally figure something out on your own. It's almost like the developers were purposely trying to make the Dark Souls of Batman games in 2003, but they failed to positively achieve that since all of these aforementioned bosses share one underlying problem in common. The train of thought behind all of these bosses in this game is that they hope you're able to break free from all of the stunlock moves these bosses have so you can put these bosses into a stunlock to defeat them. When it came to Black Mask, I only managed to defeat him because I stun-locked him with a loop of running up and kicking him, which constantly stunned him. Ratcatcher was a boss fight I won only because I managed to get these rats stuck in a corner and spam kicked and punched them until their inevitable death. Finally, with Killer Croc, I just spam kicked him until he inevitably died, and when he'd menacingly walk towards me slowly, I would flip around the room to recreate space between us. There is nothing else that you can do as Batman in these boss fights damage-wise besides hoping you stun-lock these bosses after they try to attack you, and honestly, it sucks. It's not enjoyable. There is no fun to be had when all you can do is punch or kick bosses to their inevitable death. It makes the game have very little payoff after you complete a mission, and it almost makes Batman Dark Tomorrow feel like it was initially designed to be a fighting game starring Batman characters, but eventually transformed into this overly long and tedious adventure game. For what it's worth, I don't want to make this game sound worse than it is. This game does let you choose 1 out of 3 loadouts for Batman after you've died. These loadouts, however, contain different amounts of batarangs, health packs, and smoke capsules, and you could choose the one that fits your playstyle the most. However, those loadouts and finding a playstyle that fits you best feels basically pointless when it comes to Dark Tomorrow. With how annoying the stun locks are and how often you encounter fights, all you really want is to live. That's it. There's never a point in time where you feel like using a smoke capsule to sneak around is worth it, despite Dark Tomorrow's environments and background music attempting to make you feel like you should be sneaking around. Trust me, I tried to use the smoke capsules to see if they helped, but they didn't. As for the batarangs, using them is hard to justify considering Batman is slow when he's using any sort of tool or item that he has at his disposal. Within the time you attempt to find the batarangs in your inventory and then use those batarangs on a group of enemies, the group of enemies will have already stunned you to a frustrating extent, making you wonder why you even bothered trying to use those batarangs. And even then, Batman is slow as hell when it comes to using his universal tool to unlock a door. He's even slower when it comes to using his bat grapple to platform up and down a room. How can I justify using those batarangs in a fight when Batman is just so ridiculously slow when it comes to using any and every item in this game? This is why the only loadout that ever makes the game feel playable, which is a term that I'm using incredibly loosely here, is the one with the maximum amount of health. It's the only loadout that actually lets you live long and lets you attempt to fight a ton of enemies, finish a boss fight, or explore an area like Arkham Asylum without constantly worrying that you're gonna see this game's obnoxious game over screen, and even then, Batman Dark Tomorrow is still absolutely terrible. Just like Aquaman Battle for Atlantis, Batman Dark Tomorrow is easily one of the worst superhero games ever made. It's by far one of the most frustrating experiences I've ever had while playing one of these old superhero games. It's frustrating that this game has an art direction that can be appreciated. It's frustrating that this game included lesser known Batman villains that we still barely see today. It's frustrating that the voice acting in this game's cutscene is actually pretty good. It's frustrating that the gameplay isn't fun at all. It's frustrating that Batman is incredibly slow when using any item in the game. It's frustrating getting stun locked every single time you're in a boss fight or in combat. It's frustrating that the camera is constantly getting in the way while you're playing the game. All of it, collectively, is so incredibly frustrating. The highlight of my experience with Batman Dark Tomorrow, though, is hard to not laugh at because it's the best way to cap this video off. I spent so much time playing this game just to kick off this fun series, and halfway through this game, it locked me in a room. My save file, no lie, is stuck. No matter how many times I try to use the universal tool to unlock a door, or use a key given to me by a character to try and get out of a small room filled with enemies in it, Batman is just there, permanently stuck in a room forever, meaning that he will never ever be able to save Gotham in Batman Dark Tomorrow. I genuinely can't continue the game or attempt to beat the game even if I wanted to. It's like Dark Tomorrow wanted me to stop playing it for the sake of not only my sanity, but so I can continue to live up to not beating games. You truly can't make any of this up. As far as Gotham City is concerned, it will continue to experience Dark Tomorrows as the crime lords continue to run rampant, unsupervised and unhandled by the Caped Crusader because, believe it or not, he is stuck in a room permanently. do yourself a favor and never play Batman Dark Tomorrow, because in my eyes, and as of this very moment, it truly is the worst Batman game ever made.